The metallic click echoed through the silent courtroom as Rachel Dalton placed her dog tags on the wooden table. Judge Howard Preston leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. He had just ordered a homeless woman to remove what he called a theatrical prop. But what the judge didn't know was that those worn pieces of metal carried a code that would unravel his entire career in less than 72 hours. Because some symbols aren't just accessories. Some symbols are earned in blood. Rachel had been the first woman to earn those tags with the 75th Ranger Regiment. She'd fought in Mogadishu alongside men who didn't believe women belonged in combat. She'd proven them wrong with her actions, not her words. And now, standing in a courtroom in the torn clothes, she was about to prove Judge Preston wrong, too. If you're watching this story from anywhere in the world, we'd love to know where you're joining us from. Drop a comment below telling us your city or country. And if stories like this one about courage, sacrifice, and second chances speak to you, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us share more incredible true stories that honor the forgotten heroes among us. Now, let's continue. Rachel Dalton woke that Tuesday morning the same way she had woken every morning for the past 4 years. Cold, stiff, alone. The concrete under the Veterans Memorial Bridge offered no comfort, but it offered something more important. It offered cover. The early November rain had stopped sometime around 3 a.m., but the dampness clung to everything. Her bones, her threadbare blanket, the military-issue rucksack that contained the only 3 possessions that still mattered to her. She sat up slowly, her 48-year-old body protesting every movement. The scar across her left temple throbbed, the way it always did when the weather changed. She ran her calloused hand through her gray-streaked hair, feeling the weight of another day pressing down on her. But Rachel Dalton had survived worse than cold concrete and empty stomachs. She had survived Mogadishu. She had survived Fallujah. She had survived watching 6 of her soldiers die in an ambush she couldn't prevent. Surviving herself, though, that was the hardest battle of all. She reached into her shirt and pulled out the dog tags hanging from a worn metal chain around her neck. The engravings were faded but still legible. Dalton, Rachel M., her service number, her blood type, and beneath it all, the code that once meant everything. 75th Ranger Regiment. She held them for a moment, feeling the grooves worn smooth by decades of wear. Then she tucked them back under her shirt. They stayed hidden most days, not because she was ashamed, but because the world had stopped caring who she used to be. By 7 a.m., Rachel had folded her blanket with the precision of a woman who'd spent 23 years in the military. The olive green fabric still bore the faded ranger patch, stitched on by hands, that once moved with confidence and purpose. She placed it carefully into her rucksack, along with the other 2 items that traveled with her everywhere. A laminated photograph of her platoon in Kandahar, all of them young and determined, most of them dead now, and a broken military radio that had belonged to her best friend, Lieutenant Sarah Tommy Thompson. Tommy, who had died in her arms in 2006, whispering the names of her husband and son while her blood soaked into the sand. Rachel carried that radio like a lifeline. Some nights, when the darkness pressed too close and the screams echoed too loud in her head, she would hold it and whisper into the static, telling Tommy about her day, apologizing for still being alive, asking for forgiveness she knew would never come. She walked 3 blocks to the public restroom behind the old gas station on Maple Street, the one with the broken lock that nobody bothered to fix. She washed her face in the sink, scrubbing the grime from under her fingernails, trying to look presentable, trying to look human. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across her weathered face. She stared at her reflection, seeing a ghost. The woman looking back at her had the same steel gray eyes, the same strong jawline, but everything else was hollow, carved out, empty. At 8:15 a.m., Rachel was standing outside the New Hope Community Shelter on Jefferson Avenue, waiting for them to open. A line of 12 other people stood with her. Some she recognized, Others were new to the streets. She nodded to a younger woman, shivering in a torn jacket, probably mid-20s, with the hollow stare Rachel knew too well. Another veteran, you could always tell. When the doors opened, Rachel stepped aside, letting the younger woman go first. The woman looked at her, surprised. "You were here first." Rachel shook her head. "You need it more." Inside, a volunteer named Claire handed her a bundle of folded clothes, clean but worn, a button-up shirt that was 2 sizes too big, and a pair of jeans with a patched knee. "You have somewhere to be today, Rachel?" Claire asked gently. Claire was one of the good ones. She never looked at Rachel with pity, just kindness. "Court," Rachel said quietly. "Got picked up 2 nights ago." Claire's face fell. "What for?" "Trespassing. Slept in the covered parking lot of that old shopping center off Route 9 during the storm." Claire sighed, shaking her head. "You were just trying to stay dry." Rachel didn't answer. What was there to say? The law was the law, and she had learned long ago that the law didn't bend for people like her, people who had given everything and been given nothing in return. By 9:30, Rachel was sitting in the back of a Whitmore County Sheriff's transport van with 4 other people. None of them spoke. The van smelled like sweat, stale cigarettes, and defeat. The deputy driving didn't look back at them once. Just another morning, just another round of nameless faces shuffling through the system. The Whitmore County Municipal Courthouse was a gray, squat building that looked like it had been designed to crush hope. The inside was worse. Dark wood paneling, fluorescent lights that flickered, air conditioning that rattled so loudly it was hard to think. Rachel sat on a hard wooden bench in the hallway outside courtroom B, her hands folded in her lap, her dog tags resting against her chest under the oversized shirt. Across from her sat a young woman in a blazer that looked too new, holding a manila folder like it was a shield. She glanced at Rachel, then looked away quickly. Her court-appointed lawyer, probably fresh out of law school, nervous. Rachel had seen that look before, on the faces of young soldiers right before their first firefight. "Ms. Dalton," the woman finally said, her voice small. Rachel looked up. "Yes, ma'am?" She blinked, surprised by the respect in Rachel's tone. "I'm Julia Santos. I've been assigned to your case." She opened the folder, scanning the single page inside. "It says here you were arrested for trespassing on private property, the old Riverside Mall parking structure." "Yes, ma'am." "Were you aware it was private property?" "Yes." Julia hesitated. "Then why?" "It was raining," Rachel said simply. "I needed cover." Julia looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I'll try to get the charges reduced or dismissed. This is a first offense for you, and given the circumstances—" "Don't worry about it," Rachel interrupted gently. "I broke the law. I'll take what's coming." Julia frowned. "Ms. Dalton, you don't have to—" The door to courtroom B swung open, and a bailiff stepped out. "Dalton, you're up." Rachel stood, her posture instinctively straightening, shoulders back, head high, muscle memory from 23 years of standing at attention. Julia scrambled to her feet, clutching her folder, and followed Rachel inside. The courtroom was small, suffocating. Only a handful of people sat, scattered in the benches. A bailiff near the door, a middle-aged man in the front row with a phone balanced on his knee, recording video for some local blog nobody would read. A woman at the stenography machine, her fingers poised over the keys, her face carefully neutral. And behind the prosecutor's table, a woman in her early 40s with dark hair, pulled into a tight bun, flipping through a stack of papers without looking up. But it was the man behind the bench who commanded the room, Judge Howard Preston, 58 years old, silver hair swept back, a permanent expression of disdain etched into his face like it had been carved there by years of looking down on people he considered beneath him. He didn't look at Rachel when she entered, didn't acknowledge her, just tapped his gavel once and said, "Case number 4723. People versus Rachel Dalton." Rachel stood in front of the bench, her hands at her sides. Julia stood beside her, her fingers gripping the folder so tightly her knuckles turned white. Judge Preston finally looked up, his cold blue eyes sweeping over Rachel like he was cataloging a stain. "Ms. Dalton, you are charged with criminal trespassing on private property. How do you plead?" "Guilty, Your Honor," Rachel said evenly. Julia turned to her, startled. Ms. Dalton, we haven't discussed— I did what they said I did, Rachel said quietly. No point in pretending otherwise. Judge Preston leaned back in his chair, a thin smile forming. Well, at least you're honest. He glanced down at the file in front of him. Says here you have no permanent address, no employment, no family listed as next of kin. He looked up, his eyes narrowing. You're homeless. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. Yes, Your Honor, Rachel said. Preston sighed, the sound dripping with condescension. Another vagrant clogging up my courtroom. Do you have anything to say for yourself, Ms. Dalton? Any reason I shouldn't throw the book at you? Rachel hesitated, then spoke carefully. I was trying to stay out of the rain, Your Honor. I wasn't causing trouble. I wasn't bothering anyone. I just needed a dry place for the night. So you decided to break the law. Yes, sir. Preston shook his head slowly, his expression hardening. You know what I'm tired of, Ms. Dalton. I'm tired of people like you thinking the rules don't apply to them, thinking you can do whatever you want because you're down on your luck. He leaned forward, his voice sharpening. Life is hard for everyone, but most people find a way to follow the law. Most people find a way to contribute to society instead of leeching off it. Rachel said nothing. Her jaw tightened, but she kept her eyes forward. Judge Preston's gaze dropped to Rachel's chest, where the chain of her dog tags was barely visible above the collar of her shirt. The judge's eyes flickered with something close to disgust. What is that around your neck? Rachel instinctively reached up, her fingers brushing the chain. Dog tags, Your Honor. Preston's face twisted. Dog tags? He said the words like they tasted foul. Let me guess. You're going to tell me you're a veteran, that you served your country, that I should go easy on you because of it. No, Your Honor, Rachel said quietly. I wasn't going to say that. Good, Preston snapped, because I've heard that story 100 times. Every vagrant who comes through here has some sob story about how they used to be somebody. He pointed at the dog tags. Those things? You probably bought them at an army surplus store for $5. He leaned forward, his voice hard. Take them off. This is a courtroom, not a costume party. The room went silent. Julia took a sharp breath. Your Honor, I don't think— Did I ask for your opinion, counselor? Preston cut her off coldly. He turned back to Rachel. I said take them off. Now. Rachel didn't move. Her hands remained at her sides, her gray eyes locked on the judge. With respect, Your Honor, I'd prefer not to. Preston's face flushed red. Prefer not to. His voice rose. You don't get to prefer anything in my courtroom. You think wearing those makes you special? You think it gives you some kind of pass? He stood, leaning over the bench, his voice dripping with venom. I've seen 100 people like you claiming service, claiming sacrifice, but what I see is someone who gave up on herself and expects the rest of us to carry her. Rachel's hands curled into fists at her sides, but her voice remained steady. I'm not asking anyone to carry me, Your Honor. Then prove it, Preston hissed. Remove those tags right now, or I will hold you in contempt, and you'll spend the next 30 days in county lockup. Your choice. The stenographer stopped typing, her hands frozen over the keys. The prosecutor, Rebecca Hart, looked up from her papers, her brow furrowed. The bailiff near the door, Marcus Lowe, former Marine Corps, shifted his weight uncomfortably. He knew what dog tags meant. You didn't ask someone to take them off. Not ever. But Rachel Dalton didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She simply reached up, her rough hands grasping the chain around her neck, and pulled it over her head. The dog tags came free, dangling from her fingers. She stepped forward and placed them carefully on the wooden table in front of the bench. The metal clinked softly, a small sound that seemed impossibly loud in the silence. Judge Preston smirked. There. Was that so hard? Rachel took a step back, her hands falling to her sides. Her voice, when she spoke, was low, calm, laced with something cold and immovable. Your Honor, before you continue, I'd like to ask you something. Preston raised an eyebrow. You're not in a position to ask me anything. Are you sure, Rachel said slowly, her gray eyes locked on him, that you want me to remove these? Preston laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. I already told you to, and you did, so yes, I'm sure. Rachel nodded once. Then she spoke, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "These tags carry my name, Rachel M. Dalton, my service number, my blood type, and the code of the 75th Ranger Regiment." She paused, letting the words settle. "They were issued to me at Fort Benning in 1992. They were with me in Mogadishu in 93, when I became the first woman to serve in Ranger combat operations. They were with me in Fallujah in 2006, when I held a defensive position alone for 4 hours, while soldiers bled out around me, because if I moved, 14 people would have died." The air in the room shifted. The smirk faded from Judge Preston's face. Rachel continued, her voice still low, still steady. "These tags have blood in the scratches that no amount of washing will ever remove. They've been soaked in sand, in rain, in the tears of soldiers who didn't make it home." She paused. "But if you think they're a prop, Your Honor, if you think they're something I bought to gain sympathy, then maybe you should hold them in contempt too." No one moved. No one breathed. Bailiff Marcus Lowe stepped forward, his hand trembling slightly. "Your Honor," he said, his voice tight. "May I?" Preston, his face pale now, waved a hand dismissively. Lowe picked up the dog tags, turning them over in his hands. He read the engravings. His eyes widened. He knew that unit code. He'd heard the stories, the legends, and then he saw the name, Dalton. His breath caught. He looked up at Rachel, his voice shaking. "Ironside." Rachel didn't answer. Lowe turned to the judge, his face stricken. "Your Honor, this woman isn't lying. This code, this unit, it's real. And if this is who I think it is—" He stopped, his voice breaking. "Sir, I served in the Marines. I know what these mean. You don't fake this. You can't." At the stenography machine, Martha Yates, a 55-year-old woman with gray streaks in her hair, stood abruptly. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. Tears welled in her eyes. "My father wore tags like those," she whispered, her voice thick. "He died with them on in Vietnam." She looked at Rachel, and something crumbled in her expression. "My God!" Prosecutor Rebecca Hart set down her pen. It rolled off the edge of the table and clattered to the floor. She didn't pick it up. She just stared at Rachel, her mouth slightly open, her face drained of color. Julia Santos covered her mouth with both hands, tears spilling down her cheeks. She had thought this was just another case, another file, another face. But now she understood. She was standing next to someone who had given everything, and the system, her system, had tried to humiliate her for it. In the front row, Kevin Wu, the freelance reporter, kept his phone steady, his hands shaking. He'd been filming routine court proceedings for a local blog. Now he realized he was recording something that was going to explode. He didn't stop. He couldn't. Judge Preston opened his mouth, then closed it. His face had gone from red to white. "I'm not asking for special treatment, Your Honor," Rachel said quietly, cutting him off. "I broke the law. I was trespassing. You can fine me. You can sentence me. You can do whatever you think is just." She paused, her voice hardening. "But don't you ever, ever tell me these tags are fake." What Judge Preston didn't realize in that moment, as the silence thickened around him like fog, was that the young man with the phone in the front row had just uploaded a 20-second clip to his social media, and somewhere in a town 3 states away, a retired Army colonel was watching it. Within the hour, it would have 10,000 shares. Within 3 hours, 500,000. And within a day, the entire country would know the name Rachel Ironside Dalton. But more importantly, they would know the name Howard Preston, and they would not forget. The judge cleared his throat, attempting to recover. "Ms. Dalton, I didn't mean to imply—" "Yes, you did," Rachel said simply. Preston's mouth snapped shut. His hands gripped the edge of the bench. For the first time in 30 years on the bench, Howard Preston had no idea what to say. Rebecca Hart stood, her voice quiet but firm. Your Honor, the people would like to move for immediate dismissal of all charges. Preston turned to her, startled. What? Immediate dismissal, Hart repeated, her voice stronger now. This woman was trying to survive a storm. She wasn't vandalizing property. She wasn't threatening anyone. And given her service record, I believe any further prosecution would be, frankly, unjust. Judge Preston stared at her, then at Rachel, then down at the dog tag still sitting on the table. He swallowed hard. Fine. Motion granted. Charges dismissed. Ms. Dalton, you're free to go. Rachel stepped forward, reaching for her dog tags. She picked them up slowly, the chains sliding between her fingers. She didn't put them back on. Not yet. She just held them, looking down at the worn metal. And for a moment, her expression softened. Then she looked up at Judge Preston, her gray eyes cold and unwavering. Thank you, Your Honor. She turned and walked toward the exit, her steps measured, her back straight. Julia Santos hurried after her, still clutching her folder. Bailiff Marcus Lowe stood at attention as Rachel passed, his hand rising instinctively in a salute. Rachel paused, met his eyes, and gave a single nod. Then she pushed through the doors and disappeared into the hallway. Behind her, Judge Howard Preston sank into his chair, his hands trembling. He didn't know it yet, but his career had just ended. The video was already spreading like wildfire. Veterans organizations were already mobilizing. Journalists were already writing headlines, and the court of public opinion had already delivered its verdict. Kevin Wu was the first to leave the courtroom, his phone clutched tightly in his hand. He had posted the full video now, 5 minutes of raw, unfiltered truth. He didn't edit it, he didn't add commentary, he just let the moment speak for itself. By the time he reached his car, the video had been shared 6,000 times. By the time he got home, it had reached 400,000. And by the time the sun set that evening, the hashtag Justice for Ironside was trending nationally. Rachel didn't know any of this. She walked out of the courthouse and into the gray November afternoon, the dog tags heavy in her hand. She stood on the steps for a moment, breathing in the cold air, letting it fill her lungs. Then she turned left and started walking. She had nowhere to be, no one waiting for her. But for the first time in 4 years, she felt something she thought she'd lost forever. She felt seen. 3 days later, everything changed. Rachel woke under the Veterans Memorial Bridge to the sound of footsteps. Multiple people. Her body tensed instinctively, old instincts kicking in. She sat up quickly, her hand reaching for the rucksack beside her. But when she looked up, she saw Bailiff Marcus Lowe standing at the edge of the bridge, still in his uniform, holding a folder in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other. Easy, Sergeant, Lowe said gently, holding up the coffee. I'm not here to arrest you. Rachel blinked, confused. Then why are you here? Because you're all over the news, ma'am. The whole country is talking about what happened in that courtroom. Rachel frowned. I don't understand. The video, Lowe said. The reporter, Kevin Wu, he filmed the whole thing. It's gone viral, millions of views. Veterans groups are rallying. Politicians are issuing statements. He paused. And Judge Preston. Lowe's mouth tightened. He's been suspended pending an investigation. Rachel stared at him. Suspended? He's done, ma'am, Lowe said quietly. His career is over. The Judicial Council is reviewing his conduct. There's already a petition with over 2 million signatures calling for his removal. Rachel looked down at her hands, still holding the dog tags. She didn't know what to feel. Relief? Anger? Vindication? It all felt distant. Unreal. Lowe set the coffee down on the concrete and handed Rachel the folder. This is for you, a group of us, veterans from around the county. We pulled some resources together. There's a lease agreement in there for a 1-bedroom apartment over on 7th Street, fully furnished. 6 months of rent paid in advance. He paused. And an appointment next week with a PTSD counselor who specializes in combat veterans. Rachel opened the folder slowly, her hands trembling. She stared at the papers, the words blurring in front of her eyes. "Why?" she whispered. "Because you shouldn't be out here, ma'am," Lowe said, his voice thick. "You've already given enough." Rachel shook her head, tears spilling down her weathered cheeks. "I didn't do anything." "You did everything," Lowe said firmly, "and it's time someone did something for you." Later that week, Prosecutor Rebecca Hart personally delivered a formal apology to Rachel at the shelter. She stood in front of her, her hands clasped tightly, her voice steady. "Ms. Dalton, I'm sorry. I should have looked deeper into your case. I should have seen past the surface, and I promise you I'll do better." Rachel nodded once. "Thank you." The Department of Veterans Affairs reopened her case. Within 2 weeks, her benefits were reinstated, including 4 years of back pay, enough to keep her stable while she rebuilt her life, enough to breathe. And on a cold morning in mid-November, Rachel Ironside Dalton stood in the doorway of a small apartment on 7th Street, holding the key in her hand. The place smelled like fresh paint and possibility. She stepped inside, setting her rucksack down by the door. Then she walked to the window and looked out at the street below, watching people move past, unaware of the woman watching them, a woman who had fallen, who had been forgotten, but who had never stopped being a soldier. She pulled the dog tags from her pocket and set them carefully in a small wooden box on the dresser, next to the laminated photograph of her platoon in Kandahar. She didn't need to wear them anymore. She knew who she was, and now, finally, so did the world. That night, Rachel returned to the Veterans Memorial Bridge, not to sleep, but to find the others, the men and women still living in the shadows, still waiting for someone to see them. She brought blankets, food, information about shelters and programs that actually worked. And she sat with them, one by one, listening to their stories, offering no judgment, only presence. Because Rachel Dalton understood something the world often forgot. Every person had fought a battle. Every person carried scars. And sometimes the bravest thing you could do wasn't charging into enemy fire. It was sitting beside someone in the cold and reminding them they weren't alone. 3 months later, Rachel was invited to speak at a Memorial Day ceremony at the County Veterans Hall. She stood at the podium in a borrowed dress uniform, looking out at the faces staring back at her. Politicians, active duty soldiers, families of the fallen, and in the back row, a group of homeless veterans she'd been working with, all of them clean, all of them hopeful. She didn't prepare a speech. She just spoke from the heart. "I don't know why I'm still here," she said quietly. "I don't know why I survived when so many others didn't. But I do know this. We don't honor the fallen by forgetting the living. We honor them by taking care of each other, by seeing each other, by refusing to let anyone become invisible." The applause was thunderous, but Rachel barely heard it. She was looking at the men and women in the back row, the ones who understood, the ones who knew what it meant to fall and what it meant to be lifted back up. As for Judge Howard Preston, he resigned 4 weeks after the video went viral. The investigation found multiple instances of misconduct, bias, and abuse of power. His name, once respected, became a cautionary tale, and Rachel never thought about him again, because some battles aren't worth refighting. Some enemies aren't worth remembering, and some victories are quieter than others. Rachel had spent 4 years on the streets, invisible, forgotten, but she had never stopped being a ranger. She had never stopped being Ironside, and now the world knew it too. She kept the dog tags in the wooden box next to Tommy's radio and the photograph of the soldiers who didn't come home. And every morning, before she went out to help the others still struggling, she would open the box and run her fingers over the worn metal, not as a reminder of who she used to be, but as a promise that no matter how far you fall, you can always find your way back, as long as someone is willing to see you. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that second chances are possible, that heroes can be found in the most unexpected places, please subscribe to our channel, and right now on your screen, you'll see another incredible story waiting for you. Click it, watch it, and remember, every person you pass on the street has a story. Some of them might just be legendary. Thank you for watching.